From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. So have you considered becoming a climate refugee, a climate migrator? I have. I've looked at the map. Thinking, okay, which part of the world, or at least which part of the United States, is going to be the least affected by climate change? There's no place you can go to escape it. But there are, and you may have seen the maps, there are a couple of spots that are going to be the least affected. One of them is Duluth, Minnesota. And I like it up there. I've been to Duluth and northwestern Wisconsin, Bayfield, Ashland. I like it up there. The tip of Lake Superior, beautiful. And according to the models, this could change tomorrow. But according to what I've seen, that one spot, along with northern Maine, are the two spots in the United States that, for some reason that I don't understand, are going to be the least affected by climate crisis. Because, obviously, we're seeing it happen in real time, right in front of our eyes. The fires in the west, floods in the east. A new report from the World Bank has found that up to 200 million people will have to leave their homes between now and 2050. And I say it that way because it's already happening. Islands are already sinking into the ocean. Coastlines are already being forever changed. Weather events, 100-year, 200-year, 500-year weather events are happening routinely. So climate migration has begun, and in the next 3 decades it could be up to 200 million people, unless, I'm reading from the AP now, unless urgent action is taken to reduce global emissions and bridge the development gap, a World Bank report has found. That's a big unless. Again, urgent action taken to reduce global emissions. Have we seen anything resembling urgent action to reduce global emissions? No, we have not. Do we see any hope for that with the current office holders, those around the world who sit in houses of parliament, who sit in Congress, who sit in presidential offices, prime minister offices? Have we seen anybody? I believe we have not. The closest we've come that I can find are the progressives, the progressive caucus right here in the United States. The oft-mentioned Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Squad, and a few other, there's a handful of genuine progressives. Mark my man Pocan here in Wisconsin. And there are a few other genuine progressives. And yeah, I can see them making some headway. It's a Hail Mary pass at this point, if we could ever get the progressives into power. And it's a two-part Hail Mary here. If the progressives can actually deliver, and maybe it's a three-pronged, if the progressives can take that next step, because the progressives don't go far enough. The U.S. progressives don't go far enough. They are still married to the profit motive. They want business to join in, and they want businesses to make a profit from their so-called green initiatives. Well-meaning, I'm not convinced. I'm absolutely not convinced that that's the direction to go. But there you are. Other world leaders, I'll leave it to Greta Thunberg to rail at them. But aside from the Paris Accord and every modern nation, so to speak, every developed nation, certainly European nations, they all have their happy talk, and they all, every once in a while, they come out with some big goal. We're going to be reduced carbon emissions by 50% by such and such a date, and then we're going to be zero emission or carbon neutral by such and such a date. And it's all very aspirational, but we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen any results. In fact, we've seen the opposite. We've seen carbon emissions increase over the years. When was the Paris Accord? Like 5, 6, 7, 8? I forget. It's a long damn time ago. And every year since then, we continue to dig a deeper hole. Increased carbon emissions, continuing species extinction, continuing devastation of biodiversity. We're just losing on every count. To the point now where we're studying not so much how to eliminate it, it's almost as though we've given up. Well, I haven't given up. I'm going to go down with the ship. I'm going to go down yelling. But with so much conversation about how to reinforce buildings and the hurricanes are just going to come. There's nothing we can do about it. So it's all about infrastructure, building infrastructure that can withstand these hurricanes. It's as though they've completely given up on reducing carbon emissions, on thwarting climate change. It's like they've given up. Well, okay, climate change is here. Climate change is a reality, so we better prepare for it. We better build strong levees and strong buildings, and we better move to places that are going to be less dangerous, and we better be ready for all this immigration because there's going to be 200 million people on the move because they basically have no choice. Their homes are being devastated by flood, by fire. Maybe their homes don't even exist anymore. They're 20 feet underwater. So, in all of my great wisdom, what's my solution? My solution, well, one is facing reality. Yes, we do have to buffer ourselves against the oncoming climate crisis, and that's already here. I should say not oncoming, but the worsening climate crisis, which has already begun. So yeah, okay, infrastructure, levees, prepare for immigrants. Yeah, okay, do those things. But that doesn't mean you give up on mitigating climate change. No, you put all of your efforts into that. And without going down this rabbit hole again, because you and I have been down there many times before, the only way to reduce carbon emissions is to reduce consumption and production. And the only way to do that is to basically change the way we live. We have to eliminate capitalism. We have to eliminate the profit motive. We have to pretty much change everything. We have to change transportation. We can't rely on the single-person vehicle. That has to be very, very rare in the world that we need to create here. Transportation has to be centered around public transportation, which means that changes the way we work, the way we live. It changes infrastructure. It changes urban design. We have to be able to get ourselves around without this damn car. Don't talk to me about electric cars. No, that's just not that's not the answer. Everybody has their own car. Every family, the mom has a car, the dad has a car, the teenager has a car. We can't have that anymore. That has to go. So we have to completely change transportation. We have to change the way we live. We have to have livable, sustainable, walkable communities. Invest in public transportation. And before any of this can happen, we have to jettison capitalism. We have to toss it into the waste bin of history. We have to get rid of the profit motive. We have to organize around cooperation and equality. Speaking of these immigrants, we have to open up borders. We have to absolutely open borders. Every country, it's a human right. I consider it a human right to travel on this planet any damn where you want to go anytime. Now, you can have borders in the sense of, yeah, this is our country, this is our team, you rah-rah, let's win in the Olympics. That's fine. You can also have local, regional, and national laws. I'm not suggesting that we have one world government with one guy at the top telling everybody what to do. No, just the opposite. I'm a social anarchist. I believe in as little government as possible. But the government you do have is protecting everybody from people with money and power. It's promoting an egalitarian society and an egalitarian world. And to that end, we have to open borders. People, workers have to be free. Because it's already been bad enough with global imperialism, where a few countries at the top exploit everybody else. And not only that, then you limit travel. You keep people stuck where they are. You limit immigration. And, well, yeah, of course, they're easier to exploit. Exploit the people, exploit their labor, exploit their resources. If everybody was free to move, every country would benefit. You think, oh, well, everybody would just come to the United States and ruin us. That's what you racists think out there. and maybe not even racist. Maybe those of you who are subconscious racists, you realize that you're racist. If you think that opening borders would mean that everybody would flood into the United States because we're so great, then that's just pure jingoism and racism. No, if you open up borders for everybody to travel freely, out in and out of the United States, in and out of Rwanda, in and out of France, in and out of Australia, in and out of Nigeria, in and out of India. If we open up borders, every country, every person in the world benefits. You go where you want, you do what you want, you work where you want. All of a sudden, resources start to flow. When people flow, resources flow. So climate crisis is happening. The solutions, they're simple in the sense that they're really not that complicated, except when you get down to implementation. To get enough people to agree on how we do this, that's the challenge. And that is difficult, that is complex. The politics of it, the persuasion, the fact that we do have to change our economy. We have to change the way we live, the way we get around, the way we consume, the way we produce. All that has to change pretty drastically. So it's simple. The solution to the climate crisis is simple, but it ain't easy. I read a really interesting article recently. The headline, "The climate crisis is worse than you can imagine. Here's what happens if you try." So, a pretty provocative headline. It's from ProPublica. It's written by Elizabeth Weil, or maybe it's Weil. I'm not. Weil. Some people pronounce it Weil. Some people pronounce it Wheel. I used to live on Wheel Street, Weil, right here in River West. Let's assume it's Weil. I think that's more accurate. Anyway, she writes about this climate scientist who spent years trying his best to live out his values regarding climate. But he had kids, and he had a spouse. And I could really relate to this story because when I was a family man, I kind of struggled a little bit. I definitely did. With the rest of my family. When you're living in a family unit, one person doesn't make the rules. And I was trying really hard to live up to my values, especially regarding climate and how we lived and how we consumed and how we traveled. And I tried to fashion a life that was consistent with my values. Well, again, when you're living in a family unit, sometimes it's kind of hard to do that. And you have to make decisions, and you have to learn where to compromise and where not to. Well, this guy named Peter Kalmas, a scientist, spent years trying to do his best. He changed his specialty to climate. He became a climate scientist in order to devote his life to this cause. But he was trying as well to devote his personal life. And ProPublica writes a really interesting little profile about this guy. And I don't know if you can relate to this. Maybe you can. Decisions in your own personal life that you feel are important for the climate or for the politics you believe in. Trying to live in a family unit where not everybody shares their beliefs. And this essay really gets into the guy's sort of mental health. And here's, again, where I was drawn to this essay because I could relate to it. I'll confess, I struggle. I get up some days and I'm not unique. I'm sure you feel this from time to time, right? You look at the headlines and sometimes they just seem so extreme. How is this happening? Women's rights to their own bodies, for God's sakes. Attacks on democracy, on voting and elections. And then every single damn day we wake up to this climate crisis. So let me read a little bit from this essay. His pain was transfixing, a case study in a fundamental climate riddle. How do you confront the truth of climate change when the very act of letting it in risked toppling your sanity? There is too much grief, too much suffering to bear. So we intellectualize, we rationalize, And too often, without even allowing ourselves to know we're doing it, we turn away. At virtually every level, personal, political, policy, corporate, we repeat this pattern. We fail or don't even try to rise to the challenge. Yes, there are the behemoth forces of power and money reinforcing the status quo. But even those who firmly believe we care very often fail to translate that caring into much action. We make polite, perhaps even impassioned conversation. We say smart climate things in the boardroom or classroom or kitchen or on the campaign trail. And then there's a gap, a great nothingness and inertia. What happens if a human, or to be precise, a climate scientist, both privileged and cursed to understand the depth of the problem, lets the full catastrophe in? Yeah, that's heavy, man. And this is a story, a case study, as she puts it, of one such person dealing with these issues. And not just anybody, a climate scientist, but the emotional and mental toll that it takes on you. And I think we all share this. And it's simple things. I've done myself. Stopped using the gas dryer. They went a little further than I did. They stopped using a flush toilet. And started practicing something called humanure, composting their own human waste. I never went that far. So, what do you do? How do you handle this? We're in an emergency. I handle it by living as authentically as I can and by yelling as loud as I can, I guess. It's why I have this podcast. I don't know how many people I'm reaching. I'm reaching more than I would if I just ranted to my friends. And my friends don't want to hear me rant. Maybe you don't want to hear me rant. I typically don't. I don't rant too often. Occasionally I'll fall into a rant. But mostly it's trying to impart, the word. Spread the gospel here. We are in the midst of an emergency. It's happening now. And it is dire. And whether you want to believe it or not is, I guess, a question between you and your own soul or your own sanity. As this points out, how much can we let it in? And does letting it in automatically cause despair, depression? Again, I've felt it. I feel it pretty often, I have to confess. I get up and I see the headlines, and I think, what the hell? I let it get to me sometimes. It definitely gets to me. So how do you handle it? If, as the writer points out, if we sort of intellectualize it, if we rationalize it, if we make excuses for ourselves, yeah, that might be good for our mental health temporarily. But it ain't no solution for us, for all of us, for the planet. Let's see how she closes this out here. So how, with our limited human minds, do we attend enough to make real progress? How do we not flinch and look away? The truth of what is happening shakes the foundations of our sense of self. It asserts a distorting gravity, bending our priorities and warping our whole lives. The overt denialists are easy villains, the monsters who look like monsters. But the rest of us, much of the time, wear pretty green masks over our self-interest and denial, and then go about our days. Then each morning we wake to a new headline like, "The planet is dying faster than we thought." While I was trying and failing to process it all, Peter called to make sure, Peter is the subject of the article here. Peter called to make sure I understood the importance of a comment he'd made. He's no longer embarrassed to tell people he would die to keep the planet from overheating. He's left behind the solace of denial. He's well aware of the cost. What a luxury to feel that the ground we walk on and this planet that is rotating around the sun is in some sense okay. So once again, that's the story of a climate scientist named Peter Kalmas and his personal psychic struggle that I think we all share to a greater or lesser extent. And I'm reading now from ProPublica, author Elizabeth Weil. So, there you go. There's a question we all have to ask ourselves. How do we handle? How do we deal? And what are we doing about it? Which brings me... Well, okay, let's go here. It brings me to a quote that I wanted to examine a little bit. As long as we're into this big question of how to live our lives authentically and with purpose, how to live our values, not a small question. The great philosophers have been wondering about this forever. Well, speaking of the great philosophers, a lot of people just love Alan Watts. Alan Watts wrote books and made videotapes and gave lectures, and he's an educated guy. I'm not going to pretend I'm smarter than Alan Watts. He's a very educated guy. But the problem with Alan Watts, maybe it's not his fault. I don't know. It's kind of like the same problem with Jesus Christ. Maybe he was just a swell guy. I don't know. It's his followers that screw everything up. Well, I saw a quote from Alan Watts somebody shared in my social feed. And here it is. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. End quote. Alan Watts. Now, without going into his entire catalog of work, just looking at this one little quote, that is the single dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And the fact that somebody shared it, the fact that somebody made this nice little meme, this nice little post with this Alan Watts quote. Now, I don't know what the context of this is. I don't know what he wrote before he wrote this and what he wrote after. Sometimes that makes a difference. But it does sound pretty clear, doesn't it? These are absolute terms. One more time. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yeah, these are very definitive terms. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. Okay, at the risk of debating with the great Alan Watts, what the is he saying here? The meaning of life is just to be alive? That's all it is? So we have zero responsibility to our fellow humans, to the earth itself? There's no such thing as social order or even society? There's no such thing as a social being? Which I think it's a pretty safe assumption. And then to add such blunt language, it is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Really, is it? It's really that obvious and so simple, right? Everybody rushes around in a great panic? Well, okay. That might be fair criticism, especially of me today. I'm in a bit of a panic. Yeah, when I realize the danger we're in vis-a-vis climate crisis. As if it were necessary to achieve something beyond ourselves. So it's not necessary at all to achieve anything beyond yourself. This is toxic individualism just gone through the roof. What the hell kind of quote is this? And who shares this thing? And who believes this for a second? If you want to die on this hill, well, that's exactly what you're going to do. If you want to be all alone in this world, if you want to not care about achieving anything ever, if you want to just be alive. Now again, this is taken out of context. I don't know what happened before, what happened after this quote, but the quote itself is abominable. And I'm not going to go through Alan Watts' entire catalog because it's endless. It's just massive. He wrote a few popular books, but then he talked and he talked and he talked. And every one of his lectures is on YouTube, and he became this great sensation. And people, he's a guru. People treat him as a guru. God, maybe that's the problem in and of itself. Anybody who gets treated as a guru. We're in this together. There's no just you and me. There's us. Toxic individualism is rampant, and contemporary folks are going back to old Alan Watts quotations to justify, to try to uphold this weird toxic individualism. No, we're not on our own. If we haven't learned that by now, we're never going to learn it. Hence my ennui. My morning depression when I get up and I look around and I look at the headlines and I wonder, how in the hell are we going to get together? Now, I want to remind myself right now and remind you that the good people still outnumber the bad people. And by bad people, I mean, I'm not judging them. I'm not sitting at the gates of heaven or hell deciding where they go. No, by bad people, that's just shorthand for the folks who are somehow lost, somehow getting in the way, somehow have the wrong idea about things. They're impeding the progress we need to make together. That's what I mean by bad people. So to use that shorthand, because it's easy, the good people outnumber the bad people. I still believe that. I think every data point shows that. You do the research, you take the polls, good people outnumber bad people. So we have to just toss that ridiculous Alan Watts idea that our only responsibility is just to live and not worry about anybody else or anything else. We don't have to have a cause. We don't have to have a mission or a purpose. We just have to live. That is simplistic. It ignores all the very real problems we face. All right, Alan Watts, go suck it. I'm sure I could find 1,000 Alan Watts quotes that I agreed with. If I tried, if I wanted to, I'm sure I could extract little segments of his work that I'm completely with. But that's the one I happen to see. That's the one somebody happened to share. And it's all about toxic individualism, and you don't have to worry about anything else except just living. Don't try to be part of anything bigger. Nah, that's just dumb. So there it is. That's the log for today. This episode is available on Spotify, on YouTube, on, I don't know, wherever you get your podcasts. When you do go to that favorite platform, make sure to put Charles Bursell in the search window. Charles Bursell, that's how you find the show and all the shows. Better yet, go to charlesbursell.com. All of the shows are there, all the titles for all time. Follow and contact me. I'd love to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. Speaking of social media, please share this program on your various platforms. That's how we distribute the show, really, is through your shares, so I appreciate that. Thanks to River West Radio, our flagship terrestrial station, and to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performed our theme song. All right, there it is. Go fight the fight. I love you. I'm Charles Bursell.